my husband Stan was sent to make the Brook Island film. The film, when completed, was regarded as so secret that Stan had to process it all personally, and to screen it for the big brass, the various officers and that, it had to be screened in our home. And to my surprise, they all arrived with soldiers with fixed bayonet all around the house so that no one could come into the house while it was being screened.
First off is Colonel Gorrell, now America's Colonel Rhodes and Britain's Mr. Pascal. A number of scientists from overseas were present at the trials: Colonel Coxburn of the United States Chemical Warfare Service, Mr. Weldon, Secretary of the Chemical Defence Board, Australia, Britain's Mr. Lanfear and others. A full parade was held, and here we have the men of the unit who volunteered to take part in the trial as human guinea pigs.
The experiment I was in was a rerun of Tarawa to use mustard gas and test the efficiency of that against the conventional bombardment, which wasn't very good. We had to build a site similar to a Jap defensive site, 12 different sites, and each one had a tunnel and a foxhole, and we had to take a goat up and tether it, and there was a Porton bubbler. It's a device that measures the concentration of gas. And the day the bombers came over, they came over, I think, about midday. When they came over, our job was to go up to our sites and turn on the bubblers. When the gas was dropped, we were well back out of the bomb line where the gas ran across the island. But we had to get up to the sites, and we had 10 minutes to turn the bubblers off. A bit of a rise on this hill, and we had to go up there in full anti-gas, and it was pretty slow going. We got on a Yank landing craft, and they took us back to the main Camp Island. It rained that night, and the next day, one of the fellows running the show called me over to his tent, and he said, "We had planned for you two fellows to go back in 3 days' time, but that rain last night will foul us up and it'll wash a bit of the gas away. We want you two men to go back now, 24 hours after the bombing, and spend 12 hours amongst the gas bombs." He said, "You'll just wear your jungle greens only." He said, "You can take a blanket, one blanket and a mosquito net, and we'll pick you up in the morning." We landed on the beach that day, and we had no protection whatsoever. No mask, no ointment, no nothing. And they told us to walk around the actual bomb strikes and don't rub on any of the bushes. Don't get any actual liquid mustard gas on you. But there was a terrible stench of the gas everywhere. So we went slowly up the rise, and we trying to dodge all these strikes. It's a very scrubby island, and there was mustard gas nearly everywhere. But we were particularly careful trying to keep it off our arms. We went up to where the bombs had dropped, and I put my net up, and I sat on my blanket all night in the gas. The goats were cooked, and they were bleating, and they were sick. A lot of them were in trouble. And we stayed there that night, and we must have got a lot of gas into our lungs over that night. After we got back to the main island, I wasn't too good. They inspected me all over. They said, "Oh yes, you've got a few burns," but I think the main thing that got me was my lungs. Soon after that, I lost my voice completely, and my voice went. Well, that gave me a bit of a fright. They didn't tell you much, and I didn't know how much damage had been done.
But after the mustard gas had been dropped, 2 American medical officers who'd been members of the original team refused to go on the island. And Gorrell was absolutely furious. He ordered them straight back to Papua New Guinea and told us afterwards that he rattled his gun, which he'd said they were lucky not to be shot for refusing to obey orders. And I've never forgotten. Here we've got American officers refusing to do what our volunteers or our Women's Army women were willing to do.
MacArthur was a bigwig out here, and he had the say of using a gas or not, and he badly wanted to use gas.
The use of toxic chemicals will be initiated only on the direct orders of the Commander-in-Chief, Southwest Pacific Area. When chemical warfare commences, the enemy will be attacked in maximum force.
I now invite the representatives of the Emperor of Japan and the Japanese government and the Japanese Imperial General Headquarters to sign the instrument of surrender at the places indicated. These proceedings are closed.
Coming here with trucks and took truckloads from away to make things out of them. Signboards, and put the whole works together and paint it and write the name of the station on it. There's also one bloke got a sheep yard built out of them. That one won't sit quite straight, but there, he sits up straight now, and it'll take a fair-sized pot plant. You just sit him on it. It's quite handy, really, if you like pot plants.
I dropped out because my legs wouldn't carry me any further, and I couldn't go down as far as the shrine. I never made it.
Well, since I've been in the mustard gas, I can't go out into the sun. I'm out in the sun for about a quarter of an hour. I get burnt up and blister, and I've got the blood disease. And they told me that they can't do anything about it because the red corporals are eating the white corporals in the bloodstream.
My health has been poor for quite a long time. I've had a ischemic heart for about 15 years, and nervous condition, hypertension, skin cancer, and now for the last 3 years they've diagnosed me of having chronic leukemia. Another thing that made me sick about it was I started to learn about the poor deal fellas have got. A lot died after the war of lung cancer. The widows had put up with fellas who were half off their rocker and went alcoholic and everything, and the politicians told them that they were liars or they were psycho soldiers. It never occurred.
The volunteers had a lousy deal. They should have had some sort of compensation, and medical records should have been available to Veterans Affairs or Repatriation Department or whoever, because, as I said earlier, very few people knew about it. So if you went along to repat and said, look, I was burned with mustard gas in Queensland, they would say, ha, 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 wouldn't they? And they did to a lot of the boys too, I would gather.
The worst affected parts of the city showed no immediate signs of devastation, just normal domestic scenes. The family living here had fled to their cellar when they heard the first explosion. They would have been unaware that the lethal gases would penetrate every part of their home.
It's the poor country's neutron bomb. You've seen from the results in the Gulf War that a comprehensive chemical disarmament agreement is really necessary. So that there's a certain amount of irony in the fact that Australia is pushing chemical disarmament in Geneva and trying to hush up the fact that they had these trials 50 years ago.
I think it would have been given a certain strength to our moves for disarmament if the government had made efforts to make public much earlier the experiments we had been doing during the war. This is evidence that our Australian speakers in the United Nations will know what they're talking about. I sincerely hope that the present disarmament negotiations on destruction of chemical weapons and so on will be crowned with universal success, because everyone has to sign it and everyone has to be open to inspection.
Mustard gas, I believe a lot of them were. Terrible stuff. Bad enough to shoot one another, but to try and burn them to death slowly, that's what it did. It's a terrible